Welcome to Prime Suspects. Alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr., I'm your host, Matt Landis. Adam, how was the football weekend for both Prime Sports and BetChris, and how are those two Circa Survivor entries holding up?
About as bad as each other. It was not a good week, not a good weekend at all. Oddly enough, the football wasn't as bad as what the numbers show. The Saturday college football, a bit of college basketball actually hurt us this week. I mean, what can I say? Yeah. As for Survivor, I tried to get a little bit cute, trying to make one of these things, use a lesser team. Why I got cute on the Raiders, I don't know, of all teams. But I was really betting against a quarterback starting his first game. My son's hasn't stopped talking about Sanders for I don't know how long, and I really was hoping that he was going to shit the bed, and unfortunately that wasn't the case. Did get the Ravens through, the safe pick, which didn't feel real safe early on either, but yeah, so it goes. A rough week all around, and again, looking forward to this week, and it's a big week, and we don't have to wait the full 7 days for NFL. It's straight back into it in a couple of days. But yeah, this was just one of those weeks where you want to wipe from your mind and move forward and just get back into betting. And another pick again. And Survivor this week, Friday, Philadelphia Eagles at home. Better do the damn job. So that's it. I'm locking. I'm calling it from now. That's what I'm playing. They better do what they need to do and not show up like they did in that last quarter yesterday.
Last quarter, last half. I mean, oh my God.
Well, at least, Adam, the Eagles will be laying about a touchdown if the line holds. The Raiders only favorites of a field goal. How much of your approach there was taking the Raiders for lack of better favorites being available to you at this stage of the season? And how much of it was trying to zig when you thought others would be zagging?
Oh, I zagged. Everyone's zigging, and I zagged into a brick wall. I really was hoping that the Panthers were going to win tonight and take out San Francisco and, a quarter of the field or whatnot. That's what I was going to pick. So I was really hope that it does continue that way. If I had one pick, 2 picks, 3 picks, stuff like that. Yeah, I was trying to get cute and thinking that you could use San Francisco hosting Tennessee in a few weeks, use Baltimore on one, use them Thursday on the other one once it got through. Another cute pick could have been the Saints, I guess, at home, slight favorite. Did look at Chicago, which even that one would have had hard in mouth, whatnot, but at least would have got through. In the end, and I actually probably looked too much into it, just thought I'd go against the rookie quarterback, a team that hadn't been horrible and had home last week, Monday night, short week, probably not a smart thing. Cowboys, obviously a decent team. They almost beat Jacksonville a few weeks ago. It was a close game. When you weighed up their body of work and the 2-8 that each of them had, I thought that was a safe play with the Raiders in where it currently was. But yeah, so it goes.
Indeed. And Joe, while it might not have been Adam's finest weekend, I think we can agree that he has a very established track record of making so many people better on both sides of the counter. If we focus on the player side specifically, though, few have provided better guidance than Pro Better Spanky, who has announced that his podcast, Be Better Betters, will drop the curtain after one final episode this week. What has Be Better Betters meant to you? And if you could have Spanky answer one question in the final episode, what would it be?
So what has Be Better Betters meant to me? It has the best damn intro in sportscasting poddom. I mean, I just live to hear him come on as Be Better Betters. Like, if anybody can audibly distinguish between those words, the rhythm of it is just perfect. If I was going to ask Spanky one question, and I did think about this for a while, but I was kind of, you could ask him about his business, like how his life has been changed or his business has been changed since legalization, how much how much his life has changed since, he decided to come out from behind the curtain between Bet Bash and Spank Odds, or what are we calling it now? Spot odds. It'll always be Spank Odds to me, Spanky. So much he's done, but I guess the thing that I would probably want to ask him, and I've always kind of thought this, and that is, when is Spanky going to drop the Spanky persona? Because Spanky, I get it, he's a real personality. He's done a great job of selling himself, and he's been incredibly consistent. But in a lot of ways, I feel like He's a guy who he's as crazy as a fox, right? He's made so many smart moves. He's done so well. He's had such longevity that the Spanky persona, like at what point does, like when he goes home at night, does he leave Spanky on a hanger and bring, Gudun Carrillos home to his wife and his kids? Like, who is he behind that? Is there ever an opportunity for him to kind of like put the sword down and just be himself? Other than that, I am disappointed that we aren't going to have future episodes. I get it. We all know how hard it is to do these podcasts and have content week after week. But every time he drops one, I listen to it immediately, and I will miss it.
Well said. And from some mutual appreciation between legends to irreconcilable differences between market leaders and their trade association, FanDuel and DraftKings have left the American Gaming Association in a divorce stemming from their entry into prediction markets, as reported by Steve Ruddock and others. Adam, what do you make of this, and how much does it lessen the AGA's influence and maybe even its relevance as an industry advocacy group?
Did they have any relevance beforehand? I mean, I've been watching these bozos run for 20 plus years. I mean, I think it shows that, the AGA has been talking a lot for a very long time, backtracking what they've said many times. I think this is sort of, hang up the shield and go away kind of thing now. Maybe it needs a rebirth or something of that nature. Because you have FanDuel and DraftKings just say, we don't need this anymore, or we need to head in a different direction. The market leaders of online gaming, I think that really sums up what the AJA is and has been, especially in recent years. But again, I've watched them for 20 plus years. So, I know there's been others try and spin up different versions of this and whatnot, but yeah, it feels like an organization without any teeth before this. And now, again, I guess they're going to be 80-year-old gummies pulling out the falsies, and don't know what's left after that.
All right, Joe. Adam, not mincing words, so we'll get your take on the situation, and I'll tee you up with this. What odds would you set on a future world in which the AGA blesses prediction markets, and what would it take for this to become a reality?
So I think people need to consider the fact that, the AGA was very much against FanDuel and DraftKings from early on in their life. Back in 2015, when DFS was really coming to a head, AGA was lobbying, saying hey, this is gambling. It should be illegal. So, but amazingly, at some point, they, as FanDuel and DraftKings showed DFS wasn't going anywhere. And then as they, became the number one and number two in sports betting and now online casino, it's amazing. It was a kind of a marriage of convenience. The fact that they're divorced now, I don't know. Maybe it's a Burton Taylor type of thing. Maybe they'll get remarried at some point in the future once things are definitively decided on prediction markets. Right now, it isn't decided. Everything's in flux, and clearly there's a divergent view here. But politics makes strange bedfellows, and I think if you had a future where either the courts or Congress definitively affirmed the prediction market business in sports, I don't think AGA really cares too much about betting, whether CEOs are going to say certain words in their quarterly reports and dumb shit like that. But once the courts or Congress definitively establish where prediction market sits in the firmament, I could definitely see those parties coming back together. And then, of course, because there's a certain white shoe validation in Washington to being part of that organization, even though I agree with Adam, it isn't quite what it used to be. I mean, it really showed you, Frank Fahrenkopf was the original founder of AGA. He showed what the power, soft power and relationships, the value of that, and how the AGA was so much more effective. And it was because of Frank Fahrenkopf. I've got nothing against Bill Miller or anybody else over there, but they don't have the depth of relationships in politics that Frank had. So I think it's very difficult for them. It's difficult to replicate a Frank Fahrenkopf. You just can't put the jacket on and think you're Frank Fahrenkopf, okay? But you can definitely see a future where if things settle out and prediction markets are a reality, a legal reality, and it's been established by the courts and by Congress, absolutely you could see them coming into the fold with AGA and others.
So quick question, just to educate me and the others, because what is the ultimate purpose of the AGA? Like what is, because we only hear them when they speak out about things that they seem naive or unintellectual about, but what is their actual purpose and where can they help bring value?
Well, if you go back to the reason why the AGA was originally founded through Frank Fahrenkopf, it was to keep the federal government out of casino gambling in the United States. They did not want to, there was talk about, the federal government coming in, laying taxes on the casino industry in America. The brick and mortar casino industry is very much against that. And so that's why Frank was brought in. They formed the AGA, and their primary charter was keep the federal government out of legal regulated gaming. So it's kind of interesting when you look at where we are right now. This is, if anything, the most pointed entry of the federal government into legalized gambling, whatever you want to call it, prediction markets, performance contracts, yada, yada, yada. This is probably, it would be great if they could go back and they could get Frank Fahrenkopf to come back out of retirement and represent them here, because this is probably the biggest battle that they'll have on their hands right now. Because you can just see how, if they fail this one, you can see how it potentially opens the door for everything that they've always feared, which is greater and far more expensive participation by the federal government in their business.
Good follow-up question, Adam, and good history lesson, Joe. And speaking of history, we've got some prediction market leaders looking to make a little history of their own these days. I feel like we can't carry on this conversation any farther without talking about Kalshi, which has reportedly raised $1 billion at a valuation of $11 billion, starting to approach DraftKings' market cap of $16 billion. Adam, how justified is this valuation from your point of view? Again, that would be an $11 billion valuation for Kalshi based on their latest fundraising. And what are the odds in your book that 1 year from now, a prediction market will have a larger valuation than DraftKings?
Yeah, so when it comes to valuations, what's something worth? No idea how they ultimately work these out. Actually, recently watched a video again, when Mr. Beast was offered $1 billion for his channels. And he said, no, it's more like 20. And someone actually broke down the numbers of what that's worth versus Super Bowl ads and eyeballs and all those kind of things. So, when you look at this and you compare the 11 to the 16, either DK's undervalued, which I actually think they are right now, or Kalshi's overvalued. Because again, how many eyeballs do they have? Kalshi's obviously collecting more. Their products going through Robinhood and these kind of things, the market makers and whatnot. So what is it ultimately to bring this valuation to that is where I get into. As a product, I would take DK 10 times over versus Kalshi. Most people know my opinions on exchanges, while we're calling them prediction markets these days. So yeah, they're in a tough spot. I was actually in a conversation just yesterday with someone saying, they'll get sports taken off and they'll just end up betting on the weather and things like this. I don't see it that way. I see ultimately they'll still keep the sports. They'll still keep going on the direction that they're going. A bit like sweeps. If sweeps stayed as social casino and didn't bring in sports, I think they'd be fine and living in the corner as well, but they added sports. Kalshi's starting to talk about adding casino games and all these kind of things. Then I think that's where they run into a wall and maybe a bit more pushback as to where they are. Where do they end up? I don't know, but I think DraftKings have a lot more eyeballs within their product. They have the sports. They can do a deeper product. iGaming is ultimately where they're all trying to get to anyway. Nobody except us is in the business for sports, and that's where they're ultimately getting as well. But yeah, to me, it's just all crazy. These are little old exchanges. We got the main exchange, Betfair, not wanting to be an exchange anymore. But this is the US, and the US works very different than the rest of the world when it comes to betting and trading and their consumerism and stuff like that. So if anywhere that the prediction or exchanges are going to work is the way that it's being set up and the way they're being presented right now. However, and this is where I've had 20 plus year arguments, I don't like Bet365 UI. I get on there and I can't find what I want, and I nice, simple, find my bets. I spent Thursday night on Kalshi trying to follow that Houston Buffalo game. It was all over the place. And their margins, like there was margins at time that were like $2 margins, and then they'd come back for penny margins. And I wasn't able to actually trade on it at the location that I was on at that time, but I want to get my hands on it to see how easy or hard it is, because it felt messy and chaotic and, just the money line and very sort of short on product and whatnot. So I don't know. I would much rather be in DK shoes at 16 billion than Kalshi shoes at 11. But that's just, from my perspective.
And Joe, however things net out in the battle between prediction markets and more conventional sports books, I think it's safe to say that with such large balance sheets, it's easy to imagine a large-scale marketing blitz by Kalshi and other well-funded prediction markets. What do you think they can learn from the DFS marketing blitz of 2015 and the sports betting marketing blitz in the first few years post-PASPA?
Well, I guess make sure you get the whole audience in the first year, because the market's going to punish you thereafter. And by the market, I mean the media, politicians, regulators, the public, everybody. If you look at what happened with DFS and then what has happened now with sports betting, enormous backlashes came with the public, with government, with their partners in the leagues as a result of that, huge marketing push. And we'll see history repeat itself again, I imagine, if those guys go after it like that. Only it'll be a bit more pervasive, because I think one of the pressures that they have right now, and it's because of the uncertainty that you have around sports with the courts and so forth, is to be able to make a case that, the Kalshi, Polymarket, Crypto.com, the others, the other markets that you can offer, that you can play, are every bit as relevant and every bit a part of those valuations that they're getting and driving future business. So, like betting how many candles is going to be on Taylor Swift's birthday cake and, ridiculous stuff like that. They have to really start to, I think, hit the accelerator on that one, especially, if for them, God forbid, sports drops off the menu, then how do they do it? So then their marketing push to push a product that's so pervasive, you can literally bet on anything in life. I think that one might even generate a more substantial backlash, because there are concerns about, like, okay, at what point is there a borderline that we cross or don't cross when it comes to what it is that we bet on or offer swaps on, or whatever you want to say.
All right, and bringing this full circle, as always, Adam, college football week 14 and NFL week 13 openers are up. What's the most noteworthy action you're seeing early on in this week's football betting cycle?
So I've got my on-the-road notes and the numbers, so they're good to go. College football.
Paper, how incredibly low tech.
Yes, and pen. A&M, Texas, there's a lot of volume on that. 50-50, A&M's gone from plus 1.5 to minus 1.5. 100% of the master money was on the A&M side. The other game that got really good volume, Ohio State seeing 93% of the money so far. But on the master side of it, it was 50-50 there with Michigan, mostly at plus 10 one side and minus 9.5 on the other. The other one, again, Betcris, Arizona, so we had to do a home game in this one, Arizona State. 80% of the money's on Arizona. They'd gone from minus 1.5 to plus 1.5. Arizona State, 100% of the master money. So it was general strong money that moved that there. For the NFL, Green Bay, Detroit, ton of money. I was surprised to see so much money this early. Then it jerried that, it's on Thursday, not Sunday. Getting good two-way action. The master money on the plus 3.5 there on Green Bay. Dallas, KC, plus 4, plus 3.5 come in early for Dallas. 80% of the money on Dallas, 67% of the master money. And then the other one was Seattle, Minnesota. 95% of the money on Seattle, 98% of the master money on Seattle. Now, about 50% of that was teaser money. Once again, we've got a number, 9.5. So I have to check those teaser charts. But there was some masters laying the 9 and 9.5 straight up as well. So different Monday when I went into the charts and it was like, why is there so much on these games? Again, realized Thursday, people don't have to wait as long to get limits and that raised. But yeah, short week this week and we're back into it Thursday, which looks like 3 solid games. Phillies with a win on Friday, and then, we'll see what goes into the weekend.
All right, Adam, I'll try to throw 2 quick follow-ups your way. One with that home game, as you put it, with Arizona taking on Arizona State. What kind of volume do you anticipate taking in Betcris, Arizona, as opposed to the states in which Prime Sports operates? And then as a part two in the NFL, you mentioned that Vikings-Seahawks game. Seattle minus 9.5 shaded toward 10 at some books, and then a soft minus 10 at other books. It looks like Planetech's hanging Seattle minus 10 at even money as we record this conversation. Wondering how much of that might be going to the 10 at even money to prevent 7-point teasers crossing down through that key number of 3.
Look at you, Matt. Very sharp. I think it's exactly that.
Another episode of Teaser Talk.
Joe's favorite. Got to do it.
Yeah, I did hear a little whisper that that's why it moved. There was strong money at the 9.5 as well. But when it went to 10, you did get a little bit of the buyback at the plus 10. But I did hear a little whisper in the traders meeting that they just decided to go the 10 to protect the teaser spot. And on the other one, which just dawned on me again, like I should be calling the marketing team to make sure they tackle this game hard this weekend. I would hope that we get some decent volume, but again, who knows? It's very small still in Arizona, still building up. But versus what, Prime are going to get, Prime's still a bigger book than what Arizona is. They've been around longer than New Jersey. There's just an appetite in New Jersey that doesn't exist in many other regulated states. However, I did notice an article or a headline early this week where Arizona, I think, out-volumed Nevada. So again, there's obviously more dollars in the market that we need to go and chase down. So we need to get our marketing team together, and let's just start with Arizona State. Maybe that's where I need to go for the game and head over that direction after I'm done here in Miami.
Well, Joe, we will call it there with Teaser Talk and pivot to our Turkey Day triple header: Green Bay, Detroit, Kansas City, Dallas, Cincinnati, Baltimore. Not to mention Black Friday, Chicago at Philadelphia. Adam's survivor pick locked in early on the Eagles, so we know what he'll be watching for. Walk us through the holiday slate and what you'll be watching for.
Well, I love the early kickoff for the Lions-Packers game. The unfortunate part of that particular game is Mrs. Brennan is a lifelong Packers fan and also an owner. But like many people that you should keep in mind on Thanksgiving, my wife is an intensive care nurse. And so all of those people working in healthcare, first responders, everybody who's got to put in a decent day's work on Thanksgiving, keep those guys in mind. So tough game to watch without Mrs. Brennan there. Yeah, the second game with the Chiefs and the Cowboys, I'm going to be rooting for the asteroid to take them both the hell out. I imagine after an insufferable week of the Cowboys, I'm going to be praying for the Chiefs to march in there and bring some discipline to the world. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know if it's going to be the Bengals-Ravens matchup that late in the day or the tryptophan that's going to be putting me to sleep, but not a whole lot of care in the world about that nightcap game. However, one thing to keep in mind is there's a couple of neutral site bangers in college basketball that day. I mean, you've got UNC versus Sparty, Michigan State, and then you've got later in the day, Arkansas versus Duke. Two really great matchups in college basketball that day that I may be shifting over there or at least keep them on split screen there on YouTube TV. As far as Friday, Black Friday, I am trying to blot the Eagles out of my brain here after yesterday because I think the national debate is finally caught up and I'm sick and tired of defending them. And I don't know. I think my son living in Chicago trying to be an Eagles fan has it tougher than me right now.
All right, we will go ahead and wrap up on that note. And as we always sign off, we will give thanks to you, the audience, for tuning in. Have a safe and happy Thanksgiving, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn 2. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.